Israeli forces claiming at least 450 Hamas terror targets have been struck over the last few hours as they push deeper into the Gaza Strip, coming on the heels of the IDF taking over a Hamas outpost in Gaza. This, as U.S. Central Command announces, an Ohio-class nuclear-powered submarine is now in the Middle East region, signaling a strong message of deterrence to any bad actors in the highly volatile region.
And all of this conflict could be smelling trouble for President Biden as a new poll shows Donald Trump leading Biden in 5 key swing states in a potential rematch of the 2020 presidential elections.
Meanwhile, around the planet, anti-Israel protests erupting in major cities this weekend, many calling for a ceasefire. Lawrence Jones is live across the Hudson River from where we are. He's in Teaneck, New Jersey this morning, where one school is taking extra steps to protect its students. Also, Peter Doocy is live at the White House to discuss those latest poll numbers. But first, we start with Trey Yingst, who is live in southern Israel with the very latest. Good afternoon, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. As we speak, the Israeli Air Force is hammering the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We've been watching and listening throughout the day as massive airstrikes near to the border are shaking the ground. I do want to just step out of the frame and have my cameraman push in here to the Gaza skyline. You can see some smoke rising up there. That was one of the more distant airstrikes that took place. But clearly, the Israelis are still working to hit the Hamas tunnel network underneath Gaza at many positions. They say over the past 24 hours, they've hit 450 different targets inside Gaza. They've destroyed a Hamas command center and killed a number of militants inside the Strip. This video from overnight that we captured shows the sky lighting up with some huge bunker buster bombs that are being used by the Israelis to try to get deep underground, killing as many Hamas militants as possible. I do want you to take a look here, though. We were inside Gaza over the weekend with the Israeli military, reporting there as battles raged on between the Israelis and Hamas. Take a look.
You can hear that gunfire in the distance. The Israelis are trying to engage anyone who tries to ambush their forces. And the battle is street by street. It is urban guerrilla warfare as Hamas is popping out of tunnels and ambushing Israeli troops. Right now, we're embedded with the Israeli military inside the Gaza Strip. These forces have been ambushed, shot at, and lost more than 24 of their own soldiers. Still, they fight block by block in bloody urban battle. Their enemy, Hamas, guerrilla fighters popping out of tunnels and trying to kill as many of the Israelis as they can.
You can see the level of destruction inside Gaza. The United Nations says more than 1 million Palestinian civilians are internally displaced. Now, overnight, the Jordanians dropped aid into Gaza, something they clearly had to coordinate with the Israelis, but an indication that behind the scenes, Israel is still agreeing to let some humanitarian aid into Gaza, something the American government, the Biden administration, has pushed for. Guys, back to you.
But Trey, they are getting about 200 trucks a day into Gaza, right? And do you sense the civilians do have a gateway to get out? Haven't the Israelis told them how to leave?
So the Israelis have given them a corridor to go further south inside the Gaza Strip, though we're told Israel is still striking positions throughout Gaza. The Saladin Road that runs from the northern part of Gaza to the southern part is open, and the Israelis say they are ensuring there's a humanitarian corridor, even releasing some video today urging civilians to get out of the main battle arena. As for the aid coming into Gaza, the World Food Program yesterday said it's simply not enough to support the more than 2 million Palestinians that live there. And again, that's part of the reason the Biden administration is on the ground, sending top officials to regional allies, and the Jordanians and the Egyptians pushing again today to try to get more aid in to help these civilians.
Yeah. And Trey, what about this Ohio-class nuclear-powered submarine? We're being told that it's very rare for the military to announce anything on these submarines. So to announce this means that it's supposed to send a very strong message to Iran. The U.S. has also sent or redirected more than 17,350 military personnel to the Middle East since October 7th. So how is this being perceived, in your estimation, by Hamas, Hezbollah, and ultimately Iran as well? Does this have the intended effect?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about the USS Florida, an American submarine that's got 154 Tomahawk missiles on board. It also has a dry dock that can be used to basically deploy American Marines if needed. this is a significant message to the Iranians and other regional actors not to get involved in the fight. The Americans releasing this information not in an effort to simply threaten, but to deliver a message to Iranian leadership in Tehran that could try to get Hezbollah more directly involved in the fight, or proxies in Yemen more directly involved, that if Israel is attacked at a broader level, the Americans will be there to support, and they'll be using advanced weaponry against these forces.
Yeah, and Trey, of course, in addition to the civilians who are in peril in that area that you were talking about, I saw this morning, this afternoon, your time, that apparently the Prime Minister of Thailand says that he's been told that Thailand's got 23 hostages in Gaza. They are safe. They will be freed soon, but there's got to be a ceasefire. So that's the cover now. They're saying, okay, you want the hostages out? We got to have a ceasefire, right?
Yeah, and the reality on the ground is much darker and grim, because we understand, according to the Israeli military, when we were inside Gaza on Saturday morning, they told us they believe the majority of hostages are being held inside Gaza City in the tunnel network beneath the city. And as you can see behind me, the Israelis continue airstrikes against that tunnel network. So there's a real understanding, and Hamas has publicly said this, that some of the hostages will be killed in these strikes. The Israelis have to make a calculation, though, about going into Gaza, understanding that if they don't destroy certain tunnels, those tunnels will be used as positions to ambush their forces inside the Strip. And it just further complicates the scenario on the ground.
We'll be back back there in 2 months.
Yeah, Trey, I'm curious, that as someone that's been on the ground there for years, as the aid comes across the border, will Hamas allow the Palestinian people to even have the aid? Or is there going to be some type of issue? Because when you talk to the Israelis, that's part of the point that they're making, is that the aid is just going to go to Hamas. What do you know?
It's a great question, and it's a real concern for the Israelis. It's part of the reason they're not allowing fuel into the Gaza Strip, because they know it will be siphoned off and used to help air condition the tunnels beneath Gaza where Hamas militants are hiding. And we should also note that in the past, Hamas has taken humanitarian aid that was meant for Palestinian civilians and stored it in their tunnels to use for their fighters.
Of course.
And so the American government and the Biden administration keeps coming out and saying, we can assure the entire world that the aid going into Gaza is not ending up in the hands of Hamas. The reality is they have no way of ensuring that, and Hamas is often showing up to these locations where they're distributing aid and taking the aid for themselves to support their war efforts against Israel. And so it's incredibly challenging. It's a complex situation. But with all of that said, it's critical that humanitarian aid get into the Gaza Strip, even if some of it will end up in the hands of Hamas, because there are more than 2 million Palestinian civilians there, and they can't simply starve. And that is part of this equation and part of the reason the American government is on the ground urging Israel to allow some of that aid into Gaza, understanding that it could complicate the battle and support Hamas, but ensuring that humanitarian aid does arrive.
All right, Trey, thanks so much. And keep in mind, too, we're still getting rocketed. We're up to 32 attacks since October 17th on our assets in Syria as well as Iraq. Meanwhile, earlier today, the Voices from Gaza producer, Joseph Rowdy, joined us. So what he's been doing is, by holding their identity back, he's been interviewing people 18 months before this whole war, talking to the people of Gaza, leaving their information anonymous, finding out what they think of Hamas and what they think of their leadership. And they've been blown away by how much they hate Hamas, but how threatened Hamas is, how threatening they are to the families in Gaza who are mostly Palestinian. Here's the creative Joseph Rowdy.
If Israel and its allies commit to a reconstruction project of the Strip, most Gazans will go along with it. If it's serious, if it's about reconstruction and giving them a chance for a better future. That doesn't mean they're supporters of Israel, but it's a matter of pragmatism. They want to live a better life. Since the war has now started, and they understand Hamas started it, they don't want an outcome to this war that would leave Hamas in place. They want Hamas out. They see the protests as pushing for a situation in which Israel and Hamas cut a deal that leaves Hamas in power. So they feel the protesters are not helping them.
Wow, that's That is fascinating.
Yeah, he said that they will kill your family. He said if you speak out against Hamas and say, I don't want them in charge, you're the cause of all this, they will come and kill you and your family.
Well, that's the thing. And one of the somewhat confusing elements to this story is how Palestinians really feel about Hamas, because it is the elected government in Gaza. And there's reporting that if in the West Bank there was an election that was held today, Hamas would beat the Palestinian Authority.
He believes that too.
Is it a situation where a member of Hamas slaps a gun on your dining room table and says, who are you going to vote for? Yeah. So from his estimation, Hamas really isn't as popular as others would say that they are.
Well, the question is, how popular is Hamas with the pro-Palestinian demonstrators who are on the streets of American cities and around the world as of yesterday? There were protests in London, protests here in New York City with a couple thousand winding up at the UN. There were an estimated 100,000 in Washington, D.C. And one of the chants was F Joe Biden, and the other was from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And what that's referring to is essentially from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, wipe the Jewish people off the map. Rashida Tlaib actually is one of the congresspeople who repeated that chant, as she also referred to the genocide of the people from Palestine at the hands of the Israelis, and she's gotten a lot of blowback. Listen to this.
Mr. President, the American people are not with you on this one. We will remember in 2024.
So it's a threat. Joe Biden, change your policy.
It is a threat, but we will remember in 2024. What does that actually mean? So you're not going to vote for Biden? Who are you going to vote for, the Republican candidate? Or not vote at all, which would support former President Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is. She also posted a tweet that said, from the river to the sea is an aspirational call for freedom, human rights, and peaceful coexistence, not death, destruction, or hate. So I would say that actions speak louder than words on that one, and there has been nothing peaceful or harmonious about what she's been saying. I remember when Hillary Vaughn asked her how she feels about how Hamas murdered babies, and she remained silent. So silence in that instance speaks volumes.
Lawrence?
It's such a good point, Carly. I've been talking about this for a while, and some people don't like me to talk about it. But there is a difference between Reform Muslims and radical Islamists. And a lot of them exist in our country. And for the Americans that are listening, you're nothing more than an infidel to them. They will lie. They will deceive. They will say they don't stand with Hamas, but still spew their talking points. They will quote lines from the rivers to the sea. They will have the Hamas flag flying as they protest in this country. They will say anti-American sentiment as they protest in the country. So we have to take them at their word. We have to take them at their actions. You know, I understand what the administration is trying to do. They have a lot of pressure within their party that says, hey, you know, Put the handcuffs on Israel. Don't let them bomb people. Well, this is a part of war. This is a part of, you know how many children died in Iraq and Afghanistan as casualties? But you know what? There were also children that didn't have a problem putting on a suicide vest out there and murdering our guys as well. We need to be serious about the ideology that we're facing. If we're not, more Jews will die here in America. More Americans will die as a result, and we can have the next 9/11. This is not an ideology that you can negotiate with. This is not an ideology that you can pray with and think that they're going to change their mind. It is deeply rooted in who they are, and we should confront them the same way.
Absolutely. Lawrence is in Teaneck, New Jersey. He's going to be speaking to some people who have a vested interest in what is going on there, and he'll be with that in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, let's switch over and talk a little bit about politics, because later today, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds is expected to endorse Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for president in the very important state of Iowa.
Reynolds is said to give the high-profile endorsement at an event in Des Moines today. It comes despite former President Trump's dominant lead in the GOP primary field and consistent edge over President Biden in key states.
Peter Doocy is at the White House with more on this. Hi, Peter.
Good morning. And the things this president is doing, making the case for his reelection, are not working because this president trails the former president by 5 points in Arizona, in Georgia by 6 points, in Michigan by 5 points, Nevada by 11 points, and Pennsylvania by 4 points. Pennsylvania is the state Joe Biden has visited by far the most, other than Delaware, because it is so close to his house there. These are New York Times Siena polls that have Biden ahead in just one battleground right now, Wisconsin, where he leads by 2. And it's got David Axelrod, who helped Biden get elected VP in 2008, writing, "Only Joe Biden can make this decision. If he continues to run, he will be the nominee of the Democratic Party. What he needs to decide is whether that is wise, whether it's in his best interest or the country's." There's been no movement towards Biden dropping out, and no major Democrats are signaling they are going to get in to challenge him. And it's possible this White House knew the numbers were going to be soft at this point when they convinced the Democratic Party to skip Iowa and New Hampshire so South Carolina could have their primary first. That is a state Biden does much better in. Back to you.
And Peter, in this New York Times Siena poll, the number one most important issue to people in the United States is the economy. And that is why Joe Biden is always talking about Bidenomics. Is the genius who came up with that name, Bidenomics, are they still working at the White House?
Well, he says that they ripped it off of some op-eds in the Wall Street Journal and other places where the economy was being, and his policies were being described derisively as Bidenomics, and then they kind of tried to own it. But he just is, he is calling the same policies that he's pushed for 4 years since the last campaign just something new. It's Bidenomics. And, you know, he wants to talk about how much he supports unions and how unions have always supported him, and he doesn't like trickle-down economics. Right. But whatever it is, it just, people are not buying it according to these polls.
And, Peter, the whole way in which you run against Donald Trump, if you're Joe Biden, will be to say how unelectable Donald Trump is. And you could tell if he's going to run, the attack ads will start. Just don't worry about me. Donald Trump could be president, and then what? But if you look at this CBS poll and you go deep into the Siena poll, almost on every issue, people rather have Trump in charge.
And what's extraordinary about that is Trump has a ways to go before he is the nominee. We know that he's got a dominant lead in every early state poll, but there are still prominent officials like Kim Reynolds in Iowa today who are trying to figure out who the Trump alternative is, and it seems like all the reporting over the weekend in these early states, it's a race between DeSantis and Nikki Haley. They're trying to get people that don't like Trump on the Republican side behind one of them, and it is still early, but 2 months till the caucuses. It's going to be here before we know it.
And the election is 1 year from tomorrow.
It's early-ish. We're getting to that territory.
Thanks, Peter.
Peter, thank you so much.
We're going to cover the election, right? We'll be all over that.
We're going to cover it tomorrow in Virginia.
Oh, that's right.
There you go. That's right. You're going to Virginia.
I'm going to a diner in Manassas.
Taking the train and going to the diner.